imagine a business needs rupees 50 lakhs to build a new factory, and at the same time it needs rupees 2 lakhs just for 20 days to pay its suppliers. Now here is a question. Will the business use the same source of finance for both needs? Answer is absolutely not. And that is exactly what we are going to understand in this chapter. By the end of this video, you will clearly know what is a capital market, what are shares and debentures, what is the difference between equity, preference shares, shareholder and a debenture holder, and how are short-term loans like cash credit, overdraft and discounting of bills different from each other. No complicated explanations. We are going directly to the point with simple examples. At the end, I'll give you one case study. If you understand the chapter properly, you should be able to solve it yourself. So let's begin. First of all, what is a capital market? Now suppose a business wants money for expansion, and on the other hand, some people have surplus savings and want to invest their money. The capital market connects these two. Businesses need funds, investors have surplus funds, and the capital market brings them together. In simple words, a capital market is a financial market where long-term securities such as shares, debentures, and bonds are bought and sold. Now the important word here is long-term. Remember always, capital market is equal to long-term funds. Now quickly let's understand the functions. Capital market mobilizes savings. That is, people having savings, instead of keeping all their money idle, they can invest it in securities. So, savings are channeled towards business and productive investment. Helps in capital formation or enables capital formation. Now, businesses need money to set up, expand, or modernize. The capital market helps them get long-term funds. Provides liquidity. Suppose an investor has invested money in shares but now needs cash. The investor can sell those securities. So investment can be converted into cash. Helps in price discovery. The demand and supply of securities help in determining their market price. So remember the basic idea. Capital market takes savings and channels them towards business growth. Now let's move to the main part of the chapter. A business needs money for different purposes. But before choosing a source of finance, ask just one question. For how long does the business need the money? If the money is needed for a long period, we use long-term sources of finance. Say for example, buying land, machinery, or setting up a factory. The main long-term sources in this chapter are shares and debentures. But if the money is needed for a short period, for a day-to-day expense, or say payment to suppliers or a temporary shortage, we use short-term sources of finance. The main short-term sources here are cash credit, overdraft, and discounting of bills. So remember, long period, long-term sources, short period, short-term sources. This one rule will help you throughout the chapter. Now what is a share? A share is a unit of the ownership capital of a company. Let me make this very simple. Suppose a company divides its ownership into many small units. Each of these units is called a share. If you buy a share, you become a shareholder, and a shareholder is a part owner of the company. Now there are two types of shares that we need to know: equity shares, preference shares. Let's understand them one by one. Equity shareholders are the real owners of the company. Now what makes them different? The first important difference is dividend. Dividend is not fixed. Suppose the company earns a high profit, the dividend may be higher. Suppose the profit is low, the dividend may be lower. So remember, equity share is equal to variable dividend. Next, voting rights. Since equity shareholders are the owners, they generally have voting rights in company decisions. Then we have higher risk and higher return. The return for equity shareholders is not fixed and therefore there is more risk. But if the company performs well, there can also be a higher return. Next we have they are paid at the last. In the payment of dividend and repayment of capital, equity shareholders come after preference shareholders, and so let's remember equity share with three simple words: ownership, voting, variable dividend. Say it once: equity is equal to ownership plus voting plus variable dividend. Now let's move on to preference shares. The word itself gives you the clue. Preference, meaning priority. Preference shareholders get priority over equity shareholders. Now priority in what? Priority in payment of dividend. They get dividend before equity shareholders. Priority in repayment of capital. If the company winds up, preference shareholders get priority over equity shareholders in the repayment or capital. Fixed rate of dividend. Generally, they receive dividend at a fixed rate. So whether the company's profit increases or decreases, the rate remains fixed. Generally, no voting rights. Unlike equity shareholders, preference shareholders generally do not have voting rights except in special circumstances. So remember, preference is equal to priority plus fixed dividend. Now quickly let's compare equity and preference shares. Don't memorize this comparison as a boring table. Just remember four things: dividend, voting, priority, risk. That's it. And this is where students never get confused between an owner and a creditor, that is debentures. What is a debenture? A debenture is a document acknowledging a loan taken by a company. So if someone buys a debenture, are they an owner of the company? No, they are creditor. Let's understand this with a simple example. Suppose you give money to a company as a loan. Did you become the owner of the company? Of course not. You simply lent money. Exactly the same idea applies to a debenture. So shareholder equals to owner, whereas debenture holder is equal to a creditor. Now let's look into the main features of a debenture holder. Number 1, fixed interest. A debenture carries a fixed rate of interest. This interest is paid regardless of whether the company makes a profit. No voting rights. That is, debenture holders are lenders, not owners. So they do not have voting rights. Security. Debentures are often secured against the assets of the company. Repayment. The borrowed amount is repayable after a fixed period. So the easiest way to remember is debenture is loan, debenture holder is a creditor, and the return on debentures is fixed interest. Now, who is the real owner of a company? A shareholder or a debenture holder? Think for 5 seconds. The answer is a shareholder. Now let's move ahead. Short-term sources. Imagine a business does not need money for the next 10 years. It needs money for just a few days or say a few months. Maybe it has to pay suppliers. Maybe it has a temporary shortage of cash, or maybe it is waiting for customers to make payments. For all such temporary needs, businesses can use short-term sources. The three important sources here are cash credit, overdraft, discounting of bills. Let's understand each one with an example. Now suppose say a bank tells a business, we are giving you a credit limit of rupees 10 lakh. You can withdraw money whenever you need it, but only up to this limit. This is called cash credit. Now the most important point, the business does not have to withdraw full 10 lakh rupees. Suppose the business withdraws only 3 lakh. Interest is charged only on the 3 lakh which is actually withdrawn and not on the full sanctioned limit. Overdraft. Imagine you have 50,000 rupees in your current account, but due to an urgent requirement, the bank allows you to withdraw more than 50,000, maybe up to a pre-agreed limit. That facility is called an overdraft. The word itself helps you remember it. Overdraft means withdrawing over your available balance. Cash credit versus overdraft. Now students, don't memorize this randomly. Just understand the situation. Cash credit is mainly useful for regular working capital needs. It generally involves a separate cash credit account. It is usually sanctioned against the security of stock or goods. Overdraft is linked to a current account. It is mainly for a temporary and short-term shortage of funds, and the account holder can withdraw more than the available balance up to the agreed limit. Discounting of bills. This sounds complicated, but the idea is actually very simple. It is a document promising payment at a future date. If a business holding one needs cash now, it can sell that bill to a bank before maturity for slightly less than its face value, of course. The bank later collects the full amount from the party who accepted the bill. Which is bigger, a cash credit limit or a temporary overdraft? Before we solve the final case study, let's revise everything quickly. Capital market deals with long-term securities and connects businesses needing funds with investors having surplus funds. Equity shares, real ownership, variable dividend, and voting rights. Preference shares, priority in dividend and repayment of capital, generally fixed rate of dividend. Debentures, a loan taken by the company. Debenture holder is a creditor and fixed interest. Now, meet Ria. She owns a small but growing bakery. This month, she has two completely different financial needs. The first situation says Ria wants to build a brand new factory unit worth rupees 50 lakh. She expects to use the factory for the next 10 years. The second situation says she urgently needs rupees 2 lakh for just 20 days to pay her flour and sugar suppliers. Her customers will make their payments next month. Think carefully. Which source of finance should Ria use for the factory? And which source should she use for the temporary supplier payment? For the rupees 50 lakh factory, she needs money for a long period. Therefore, she should use a long-term source of finance such as equity shares or debentures. For the 2 lakh supplier payment, she needs money only for a short and temporary period. Therefore, a short-term source such as cash credit or overdraft can be used. That's all for today. Subscribe so that you don't miss my further chapters and score good this year.